Have you seen the Broadway hits Kinky Boots or Aladdin? If you have, you'll remember the music, the fabulous performances, the stories, the sets. But do you remember the costumes? Well, you should. My guest today is Gregg Barnes, two-time Tony Award-winning costume designer and three-time nominee. He won the Tonys for the 2006 productions of The Drowsy Chaperone and for the 2011 revival of Follies. He was also nominated for Legally Blonde in 2007, Flower Drum Song in 2009, and for Kinky Boots in 2013. And he has so many other credits to his name. When I met Gregg recently, I learned so much about his design work and realized how important he is to the performers who depend on him to make them look just right and be able to move with comfort, even if you're Billy Porter in Kinky Boots and need to dance in very high heels. After today's conversation, I hope that you will share my newly acquired appreciation for the art of costume design and for the work of Gregg Barnes. I'm Alice Bloom. This is A Town and Village Too. Welcome back. Gregg, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You must be very busy right now. I mean, Aladdin's just opened to wonderful reviews.
Yeah, we just, 3.5 years later, we got that on its feet.
Is that how long it takes to get a show together?
Aladdin actually really closer to 4, if you include the pre-production we did it in Seattle first, and to try it out, and so it's been about 4 years.
Do you dream of Genie?
I guess in a way I do. Genie and Aladdin and Jasmine and the whole,
the whole crew there.
The whole crew.
I mean, what inspires you? Especially, I'm asking too many questions. Let me ask you this. When you're doing a revival, Aladdin, for example, is in our memories. We've seen the movies. We all grew up with Aladdin. We've had books of Aladdin as children. How do you get re-inspired, or how are you affected by what was previously done?
You know, it's a really interesting question, because early in the game, you have to decide how much do we honor the spirit of the animation, how much do we reference it. And Disney Theatrical, the Broadway division of Disney, is very, very committed to not actually slavishly reproducing those animated movies. I ironically had designed a couple of ice shows for Kenneth Feld, and they licensed the Disney stories for Disney on Ice. And in that case, it's a completely different point of view. You really are bringing the animated movie to life. So I had done that already, and actually Aladdin was one of the stories that I had been a part of. And so this was, I was tentative at first, because I thought, well, I wonder what their expectation is, and how far do I push the envelope, and where do we, so, I mean, with every job, really, and especially with a new piece, the whole thing begins with the research part of it, and a lot of those questions get answered as you start to poke around into,
Well, let's start this way. What direction do you get when you're signed on to do the costumes? You did Bye Bye Birdie, you did Elf the Musical, of course we mentioned Kinky Boots, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, so many other, Sideshow. Those are just the Broadway credits, and then of course you've got films to your credit as well. How does someone start? They bring you on, do they say, bring us some sketches?
No, the sketches come later in the game. Oftentimes, anybody that goes to the theater regularly, if you read your playbill, you'll always see that the actor A and actor F have worked with director 15 times.
Okay.
And a family sort of gets created. And it's a very small community, really, ultimately. And when the stakes are high, you tend to depend on people that can deliver what needs to, are good in the stressful times, or are very inventive, or can handle the financial requirements of whatever the project might be. So on most of these musicals, they're all directed by 3 different guys. So it's interesting. My entire Broadway career is maybe, 12, 13 shows, and you can divide them up into the 3 directors that are my sort of family. Mm-hmm. So we have, and one of them, ironically, Casey Nicolau, who directed Aladdin and Drowsy Chaperone, and also the Book of Mormon, which I didn't design. We grew up together. He's from San Diego. Mm-hmm. So I've known him since he was 15 years old. So we really have a common cultural we're about the same age. We come from the same pop, references locally, and we're very much of a kindred spirit in that way. So when I get hired, basically I'll sit down, and I think probably your first impulse is to literally go in clean, meaning don't think of anything.
Is that
Be a good
possible?
listener.
Yeah.
No, of course it's impossible. Yeah, but you go in and you think, don't try to steer the conversation, because there's all of these, the theater is truly a collaborative art form. So you go in and you think, just listen, write it all down, ask hopefully questions that, probing, intelligent, questions that are relevant to where you're going to take your part of the job. But and then I take that information away and I begin to I just really make lists. He said this, and sometimes people don't say what they say what they say, but they don't say what they mean, or you have to listen in between the the conversation to the unsaid. And so that's when the research starts. And what I do is I go back then to Casey or to Jerry Mitchell or to Bobby Longbottom, and I present this galaxy of, it could be any of these things, but I've obviously narrowed the field, even though...
You sound more like a psychologist.
Well, there is that dynamic. Sometimes I think, I have the wrong job title.
But you're listening to what people are saying, but you're intuiting that they don't necessarily mean what they're saying, but you're looking for clues.
Or that they know exactly. Sometimes, like there will be, if you ask a question, the answer could be, I know exactly what this is. This is the reference. This is the emotional intention. This is the storytelling point. And then you'll say, oh, I love that. What about when we get to the 11 o'clock moment? I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on there. Mm-hmm. So when I come back, the things that they had a really strong notion on, really 85% of the time those things don't change. So I try to flesh that out with images, because that's my job, is to take ideas and make them
Let's talk a little bit about Kinky Boots, since that was the one that really got so much play, and maybe we'll get some slides up. We have some of your sketches. How many sketches did you do for Kinky Boots?
Kinky Boots, ironically, there's a world of factory workers, which I didn't sketch. I did a couple of sketches just as a sample. How about this? Does this feel right? Is that the right direction? And then I sketched all the drag characters. So there aren't actually that many sketches, maybe 60. Aladdin has maybe 300. So even though Kinky Boots has more costumes than 60, and we can talk about how that one was unique, but Kinky Boots, I mean, but so there wasn't really that much drawing. I mean, that is a lot of drawing. You figure, for me, a sketch takes maybe 5 or 6 hours. So if you take Aladdin with 300 sketches and you do the math, it's many, 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 many months of, and not every sketch is a home run. So,
Well, but I'm trying to understand the process. So you've had this creative meeting with the whole creative team, and you get some ideas for, there could be many, many characters. You're designing everybody's costumes, right?
Their shoes, their everything. But
wigs, hair?
Not the hair. There's another person that does that job.
But aren't they correlated?
They are. It's a dialogue, but they ultimately have the...
Okay, so then you're given a period of time to come back with your ideas. What's a normal period of time about?
On Sideshow, my first show, we developed that for 6 years. Oh. So a long time. Yeah. On Kinky Boots, maybe a month.
1 month to design all the costumes?
No, just to come back with the research and the storytelling.
Did you feel enormous pressure?
No, I'd worked with Jerry so many times, and he's such a generous collaborator. So at that stage, what happens is I bring back all of these images, and he actually is a great tear sheet image guy himself. And he'll say, that's it, 100%, that's where we're heading. This I don't get. This I love, but I don't think our audience will understand. So you're always taking the audience into account when you're developing the visual. And so then you go back and you start to draw. And the drawing part, what I do is the drawing is a template for what I'm eventually going to paint. So I do a sketch, it's the same size as I'm going to paint it, on vellum, and then I take those all back, and we have the same dialogue. Home run, don't get it, maybe, maybe, maybe. And so then I go back, and so it's a dialogue.
Back and forth. Now, when you start out, are you given a budget?
You know, every question is always like, yes, but not always. Or, yeah,
Okay.
but no. Generally, the producers will say, we don't want to get in the way of the creative sort of thrust of the project.
Okay.
And then most of the time, what happens is the money part of it is tricky because, especially on a project like Kinky Boots, although the producers are so generous, but people think when they look at, for instance, in that show, for these factory workers, a woman in jeans and a smock and a T-shirt.
Looks like a no-brainer.
Exactly. They think she brought it from home. And you're saying this is going to cost, fill in the blank amount. And it depends on, some of it we do shop, some of it is custom made. And inevitably there's this jaw-dropping moment where the producers will think, you're kidding.
Are you out of your
mind?
mind?
Why is this, right? And I always say, especially if they're well-dressed, I say, let's total up what you're wearing, none of which was custom made. And then I say, of course, I don't want to be vulgar and ask, but I think just to, check off how much were the shoes. Okay, they're Louboutins, $1,200. And by the time you add up, what some people spend on clothing, it's a significant amount of money. And sometimes in that case, we may actually be under that figure. But as soon as you have something made,
we all know custom making anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the constraints that you figure into making a costume? First of all, are they made in the United States? Mm-hmm. They're made here?
Yeah, 90%, 99%.
That's wonderful.
95%. On Aladdin, we had some beading done, and some things made in Canada, some beading done in India, some shoes were made in South America, but most of the clothes were made in America.
Now, maybe you've got the design now, you've got the concept for how this character is to look. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about when you're designing the costume for Billy Porter or anyone else who's going to be moving and dancing and jumping and hopping and moving around there?
Yeah.
How do you construct this? This isn't just a dress or a pair of boots. It's more than that.
Yeah. There's a whole, for people that have seen Kinky Boots, ironically, the journey, the story of that film and our musical version of that film, and it's based on a true story, we, as in my department, went through the same arc of that story. We had to learn how to have a heel that can support the a man's weight. That's a stiletto heel. We had to learn how to, and in fact, we weren't building shoes for people to go out to a nightclub and, sort of be fantastic. We were building shoes for a professional, skilled, incredibly highly trained singer and dancer to pull off this show that they're going to do 8 times a week, and you can't have everybody in physical therapy all the time.
Oh
and
no, you don't want
over
anyone to get hurt.
So we had a huge learning curve. In fact, it still goes on, I have to say. The boots in Kinky Boots, although we actually did amazingly well. We were very, very lucky to have T.O. Day, Gino at T.O. Day made the boots, and they're really kind of works of art in a way.
But they have to be almost like athletic equipment.
Mm-hmm. They are. There's special things you build into the sole that are special high impact, 21st century technology materials. They're the way the shank is molded, the way the heel is sculpted, the pitch of your foot to the height of the heel, the size of the platform if there is one. The way the sole, you make them, they rock up a little bit on the front. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a show where they don't dance and the shoe rocks up, you think this shoe, you're not going to feel the floor. But in a very treacherously a 7-inch heel shoe, you need the rocking motion to keep yourself. It helps you stride in them. So there was a lot to learn in terms of the boots.
Do you have a rapport with the performers who are going to be wearing, in this case, boots or the costumes? Do they give you feedback on what they need?
Oh, yeah. In fact, what I should say, and it's not just the costume area, I think the actor is the one who is going to deliver the story. They're going to deliver the playwright's story. They're going to take the director's direction, and all the things that everybody does, the sound, the lighting, every bit of it, especially the wigs, is there to support the actor telling the story. So really, even from the research stage, that's always in the back of your mind. How can I make the point the director wants, but not do too much. Let there be room for the actor to make this their own. I actually even hate the word costume because I think it should be the actor's clothing. I want them to think, even if it's a fantastic Follies ghost showgirl, I want them to go into the dressing room and think, I'm going to put on my clothes and go be a ghost from the Follies. You know what I'm saying?
I do. You know, it's interesting you say that. I mean, one of the TV shows that's really, you know, captured everybody's imagination is Mad Men. I happen to have met the cast of Mad Men. And we were talking about costumes, the dresses, and those are not made. They actually did find vintage dresses. And I think it was the character who plays Megan was telling me, one, they're not allowed for those costumes to leave the studio. Nobody takes anything home or wears it to a party.
Sure.
But two, how they are transformed when they get into costume.
Yeah.
You're back in the 60s.
Absolutely.
The tight clothing, the wild, you know, the patterns and things that you wear.
And it's brilliantly done. I mean, that is, I don't know who does it, but whoever it is in charge of that department is a genius. I mean, it's so exquisitely done.
But do you have that aha moment when the costumes are made and you see the show, you see the run through, do you ever say, yep, that worked, that is Dorothy? Or
there are, oh yeah, of course you have those moments. And what's interesting is that in the theater, I don't know, I can't answer for everybody, but normally it's the opposite. You're just looking at all the things you messed up. Oh. Why didn't I? I wish I'd seen, I could have done, I could have helped.
Are you sure you're not a lawyer?
I'm a psychologist lawyer.
You've got a lot of hidden talents here.
But I think that's kind of what makes you keep hopefully reinventing yourself and the work. But one thing that's relevant to what you asked, in the fitting, if somebody puts something on and I just think that is like I'm a genius, I never say a word. I just let the actor, they put it on, and if they have a reaction to it that feels false, or I know that thing is not going to make its way onto the stage. I never ever force. I hope the actors that I've worked with would agree with me that I've never forced my wish into their storytelling.
Have you ever revised? Have you ever looked at it and said,
"Oh, sure,
just not working"?
Oh, yeah. You know, they come in. A person can come in and they say, we all have body image issues, and so a person with the most perfect, zero body fat, tall, lithe, you would kill to look like that person will walk in, and they have an issue someplace, and if you've designed a costume not knowing that, because you think, well, they're perfect, and they're just, I say they always put it on, and they look in the mirror, and they look immediately to the place that they hate. And once if you're in tune with it, and you say, I'm sensing that, even if they're not going to say anything, because sometimes I think they think, well, that's the job, and I'll say, you don't like this, you have an issue.
That waistline or that.
And then they'll say, "Oh well, it's not, it's not about me, but I hate my hips." And I'll say, "What if it was pants? What if it was a skirt?" Oh, and then we can have a dialogue. And the journey is to stop talking about actress and to start talking about character. It's important to know, because we all bring ourselves into. We bring ourselves into, I think actors would agree with that there is a part of them that they're using their own self to, enable them to be able to be a princess or a witch or a villain or they're going to access things in their own past or in their own story that they can use to tell this other character story. So eventually you stop talking about, Julie, the actress, and you talk about Hedda, the character, which is it's a.
But you're almost magical. I mean, I know people who work in the theater, and what you hear a lot is about the temperamental nature, the egocentric nature of many performers. And you seem to be able to avoid that or somehow survive it in a way and transform the conversation into the character. And how does the character feel in this costume?
That's certainly my goal. I think that what's funny about being a costume designer is that in order to be good at it, you actually have to have a big ego. You have to understand your worth. And maybe that's not ego, but I think it is. And yet, you also have to be a person that's willing to say, I'm putting this on the shelf because this person needs me to. It's almost like maybe being a parent, not that I've been a parent, but there is something about having empathy with the person who, it's a very special thing in your gene pool to be able to get up and do that and to do it well. I mean, it's not easy. And you see how people shape their whole life around delivering a certain performance and how you can always tell. It's funny because I work in the theater 90% more. And when famous actors come to Broadway, they always say, that is the hardest thing I have ever done. And you think, really? You always, that you hear that, I remember Julia Roberts said it when she came to do 3 Days of Rain, I think was the play. And she said, I'm just gobsmacked at how difficult this is because you have to,
There's no second take. I mean, if you're on stage, you've got to get it right from the get-go. But that's where the costumes, it takes a certain amount of ego, but humility. Because when you've got it right, it's like anybody else in fashion. If you got it right, you forget about your clothes, or at least that's what I was taught, and you go out there and you be the best person you could be in whatever role you're playing that day. But if the clothing's bothering you, if you're pulling at it or tugging at it, or if it doesn't feel right, or if you're seeing only those hips magnified,
that's right,
then you're never going to be able to release yourself to be the best person you can be.
You go through maniacal detail so that you can forget about it.
Exactly. Oh, well said.
Yeah.
Now, once it's done, you got it right. It's taken 6 years or it's taken how many months? You've got it right. Are you done?
No. It really never ends with a play. Kinky Boots, we're a year and some months into it now, and there's been maybe 25%, maybe 20% of the cast has switched over. And it's the kind of play where I don't want to just say, this is what we developed, you jump into that look. I want to be part of making sure that the new actor gets the respect of the process to the best of my ability. A lot of it happened while we were up in Canada doing Aladdin. So you have to also make sure that you're connected to people that think like you do so that they can sort of step into your shoes so that the actor has that comfort spot.
Well, I would imagine that also becomes an issue if you have an actor take a substitute actor who has a very different body shape or size than the costume you normally designed.
Yeah. I remember when we were working on Follies, I asked Bernadette Peters, because right before we did it, she had gone in to A Little Night Music. And she wore not the same clothes, but the same designs that were created for
Follies?
No, for Little Night Music. For, what's her name? The movie star, married to...
Oh, I can't remember. Well, whatever. It'll come to both of us. We're having a senior moment here, the two of us.
And I asked Bernadette, I said, well, was that something that were you uncomfortable with that? And she said, those clothes suited me so perfectly.
Lucky break.
Yeah. So they remade them, of course, but the designs were essentially the same.
Was that Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Okay. I saw that, actually. And it's very interesting. I was lucky enough to have great seats for that show. And Catherine Zeta-Jones, of course, is breathtakingly beautiful. But I was taken by the costumes because I was looking at that and I said, that looks like it must hurt because she looked like she was very heavily corseted. That was the style. But yet I said, if she couldn't sing, she couldn't dance the way she was.
It's funny with that the thing about the undergarment, and this is very individual, but, especially when you work in opera, sometimes, you would think, oh, you put this restrictive cage on and you can't even breathe. Some people, depending on where they find their breath, love it because they push their diaphragm against the corset, and it's a way to gauge, I've got the breath to hold this for this. It's sort of like technically it helps them. And then some people are like, get it off, get it off, get it off. So you do try to, it's the same thing, you try to individualize everything for the person that
Now,
has
you
to wear it.
started out teaching. You taught at NYU. Do you still teach costume
I
design?
don't teach. I taught for 20 years at NYU, but I haven't taught for a decade now, but I did for many years.
But you've been in the design field for quite a while. You've seen a big transformation in fabrics and clothing. What did we do before spandex?
Willa Kim, I wish you were talking to her because she's a genius. She actually did a lot of dance, a lot of incredible, she sort of wrote the book on dance costumes. And I don't know if it was in the 60s, I imagine. They had developed Lycra, and she thought we have to find a way to be able to paint this magical fabric that's so perfect for dance. And she actually went to a silkscreen company. And so there is an incredible, like in the course of not exactly my history, but the legend of, people like her, these legendary designers, 40, 50 years ago, she was spearheaded this thing that now we just take for granted. We think, we can go to
Now you can
Blick and buy the paints, but so it's interesting to see how much has changed.
Do you use technology like digital technology in costumes at all?
People do. A lot of people sketch on the computer, and there are.
Or incorporate lights into their costumes.
Yeah,
I mean, when it's
the
called for.
Rockettes have a costume they just did that is.
And you've done many, many spectaculars, right?
Yeah,
The
I've done a
Christmas
lot of things
spectaculars.
like that, and the circus, and a lot of that stuff. I tend to be more. This is terrible to say because some people thrive on technology, and I'm one of those people that has trouble sending an email. So I'm always trying to find the old world craftsman who still remembers how to do
Sew it by hand.
exactly, or beat it, or work the leather, but it's interesting. I do surround myself with young people that are keyed into that stuff because, especially on Aladdin, we have a lot of things that we developed textiles, and we had them digitally printed, and so that we could always get them, hoping that it'll be a big
Greg,
hit.
I wish we had more time. One last question, and I have to let you go, though we'll talk for hours afterwards. Is there a relationship between costume design and fashion? I kind of expected I was going to see Kinky Boots on all the shelves in the stores, that we were all going to be wearing thigh-high red boots, and I didn't see it.
No, well, what was funny? We did have a tie-in with Kenneth Cole. They developed a line of, I think it was 3 pumps and 3 pairs of boots, and they sold them last holiday season. And they had a Kinky Boots brand in the sole, but it's very rare, and it's a very different task. And I think, although Isabel Toledo just designed After Midnight, and it's spectacular, beautiful, beautiful work. So I think there can be crossovers, but generally we sort of march along in our own discipline.
But it's not an expectation. You're not disappointed if you don't see it happen.
No.
What's your next project?
Actually, it's terrible. I'm not even interested in it.
You're not a fashion person,
Not
huh?
a fashion person, unless it's good storytelling.
Next project?
Next project, Tuck Everlasting at the Alliance. A new musical based on that children's book.
When is it expected to open?
That's in December. I have the Kinky Boots tour, and I'm doing June Moon at the Williamstown Theater Festival in about a month and a half. So I'm busy.
It sounds like you're keeping out of trouble.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for making the time to be here today,
Oh,
Greg.
thanks for asking me.
It's been my pleasure.
Great.
I'm Alice Bloom. This is A Town and Village 2. We'll see you next time.